Welcome to Culmination, where we're not experts, but we sure have a lot to say. In the process of becoming our best self, I have with me my sister, Lori Kaufman, to discuss astrology and the manifestation of the mind. And with that, let's get started. So, Lori, would you mind defining astrology?
Yeah, so astrology is a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And most people, I would say, just know the very basics. They just know their sun sign, and a lot of people think that it kind of just ends there. But astrology can tell us a lot of things about ourselves, our personality. It can help us with seeing who we want to become, who we want to be, who we maybe show ourselves as to the world. And it also gets a lot deeper. It can show us where we should focus our time and energy on, depending on what the stars are in the sky and where the transits are currently based off of our personal birth charts. And we can just do a pretty big deep dive into exactly who we are this way.
Awesome. So do you want to get into that? How does that all play out? How does that work exactly?
Yeah, so a lot of traditional astrologers look at the placements in somebody's birth chart, looking at where everything falls and what the planets mean based off of, I guess, historical meanings of the planets. You can take that and then mix that with the house system, and each house, of course, means something totally different. So there's a lot of different kind of aspects of our lives.
Is it just another category to group things in?
Basically, yeah. And then once it's all mixed together, you can add the personality traits of whatever sign is in it, and each sign means something beyond personality traits as well. So it's kind of like learning the patterns of how to read each thing separate and then putting them all together to figure out their deeper meaning.
Could you give me an example?
Yeah. So, for example, in my personal chart, I have Aquarius is my sun, my moon is in Aries, and my rising or ascendant is in Cancer. And so that's kind of where your big three is. That's what kind of more defines you. Your sun is going to be your ego, and that's what everybody pretty much knows about themselves. Your moon is going to be your inner emotions and who you tend to be around your personal friends and family, or around people who know you better, around things that you're comfortable with. And your ascendant is kind of affects more of how you dress, how you look. It can be physical appearance. It can be certain parts of your body. It could depend on whatever your ascendant rules.
So like physical identity?
Yeah, like literal physical identity. For example, mine being in Cancer, Cancer rules the moon. So I have a rounder head, a rounder face. Whereas like somebody with a Libra ascendant is going to be very balanced, very symmetrical.
I thought you were going to say that.
Really?
Yeah, it's like because it's a scale.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's a very easy one.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Capricorn risings tend to be very thin and bony. Aquarius risings can be more alien looking, almost, like have bigger foreheads or have like weird, they tend to be very weird. They might just be the people who are covered in tattoos or piercings or have colorful hair, or just be more drawn to just anything weird. But with that being your rising, that would be your physical appearance. So that is how you would want to perceive yourself as. That's how you want others to perceive you. Whereas your sun and your moon are just kind of more of your ego, who you are, who you act to be, whether or not it matches with how you dress or how you look.
Okay, so that's like the internal identity? The sun and the moon, at least?
Yeah.
Okay.
And how you act towards others when you're first meeting them as well. But yeah.
So what's the word? How do these connect? Like, why would the sun connect to your ego? Why would the constellation, or zodiac is a better word, why would that connect with the sun, and how does all of this stuff relate? It's very confusing.
Yeah, well, when it comes to the sun and the moon, honestly, it's more just fun. It's fun to say, oh, I'm an Aquarius. What are you? What's your sign? Like, that's just become very pop culture-y lately, and
Okay.
everyone knows that, and everyone tends to talk about that pretty openly.
So it's like an easier identifier, in a sense?
Yeah, but also everything I read about those signs, I do agree with. They do tend to have pretty big personality traits. However, my ascendant in Cancer, which I don't tend to relate to anything personality-wise about Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I've read about it just that doesn't describe me personally. But it is how I look, and it is kind of, I guess, how I dress. And your ascendant also sets up the rest of your chart. So your house system, especially if you use something called whole sign houses, it brings the setup for how they write horoscopes.
All right, so then I guess we can transition to what is a horoscope.
Yeah, so that's kind of more of the, like, mainstream, oh, like, did you read your horoscope today? That's what people know when they know astrology. But most people are reading their horoscope wrong. So whether or not you relate to it, if you're reading it for your sun sign, you're actually not reading the right horoscope for you. And depending on your exact calculations, you need to know the exact second you were born to set up your chart. And if any of your calculations are wrong, then it can affect so much with horoscopes. So
wait, real quick, what does that mean about you when essentially you're scored with, the sun in Aquarius, for an example, and that's not an accurate depiction of you? What does that mean if it's actually wrong?
Like, you don't relate to your sun sign?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people don't relate to their sun.
Or just any of them in general.
Yeah, and that tends to be what a lot of people who don't relate to their sun sign, those are the people who claim to not believe in astrology, which astrology is not something to believe in. It's math and it's science and it's historical data. It's not a thing to believe in or not.
It's just like a thing in the background. Like, it's always happening.
I mean, it's always working. It's always happening. But a couple things depend on your sun sign. If you have a day chart or a night chart, meaning if you were born while the sun was out or while it was not, that can affect how your personality comes out as well. Finding where your sun lies in your chart, what house it's in, can also have a pretty big aspect of it.
Right.
Especially if your sun falls in, like, maybe your 12th house. 12th house is more of, like, hidden secrets, and that can be, like, anything unknown or, like, mental health even. So you might not, having your sun in your 12th house, you might not be a person who wants to share that side of you. And so you might be more likely almost to not relate to your sun sign. But also, every ascendant has a ruler, and the ruler of your ascendant is what sets up your chart as well. So,
and what do you mean by ruler?
So every sign rules a planet.
Oh, okay.
So Cancer, my rising, my ascendant, rules the moon. And so the moon actually rules my chart, and my chart is then ruled by Aries. So Aries tends to be where my personality comes from. And when I read anything about Aries, I definitely believe that.
Okay.
Like, that makes sense for me because I do tend to have a lot more Aries characteristics than Aquarius characteristics. And that's how my chart, that made sense for me.
Yeah. And it seems like it's interesting because it seems like there's this whole taxonomy about it. You know, like how you define the animal kingdoms and everything, like, or really just every organism, how there's the kingdom and the phylum and then down to the genus and the species. It's just like there's all these different categories and it's very intricate and complex, and one wrong calculation, as you said, can just throw the entire thing off. So
For sure.
So you think that is why someone might look at their horoscope or something and see a description that is inaccurate?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Especially if you're reading your horoscope for your sun sign. But I tend to use Placidus. And so that's a different form of astrology that uses the exact calculations, whereas whole sign houses tends to just kind of put them into easy to understand boxes.
Like for dummies?
Not
For more
really
intelligent dummies?
Yeah, it's more just to generalize for horoscopes, I think. It makes it a lot easier to understand. And it puts each sign into its own category. So I can actually show you that looking at my pulled up chart here. In a whole sign chart, these two lines here would match up.
Oh,
So
like
every sign would be in a house. Whereas, like, especially this one right here, see how small that house is? So
I'm still a little confused just looking at it, but it's...
yeah.
Do you mind if I put it on screen when I make the video?
No, of course not.
Okay. Yeah, this is... It's something. So, like, when it's slightly crooked, it's supposed to be lined up, and that's the...
So if you are
Accurate.
using whole sign houses, it will be lined up, but with the systems that I prefer, it's not going to be, because this is going to go by exact calculations of everything going on.
And, like, you can never know the full truth, right?
Well, I mean, even reading your horoscopes and then looking at this chart, it might not be fully accurate, but I could give myself a horoscope based off of my actual placements. And that is what I'm kind of learning to do now with, I mean, most people who come to me are looking for readings just to learn more about their personality.
Yeah.
Or just, you know, have
Like
an
a
excuse to
simple,
talk
fun
about
thing.
themselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, who doesn't want to try to learn more about yourself? Everybody's seeking that out. It's basic human psychology. It's a personality test in a way.
Right.
But there is also a very big aspect, because if you see right here, I can turn on the transits or turn them off. So these little green ones on the outside are the current transits of what's going on in the world right now.
Oh, okay.
And I can match those up, and I can see that Saturn right here is right over my sun.
So what does that mean?
So Saturn stands for life lessons.
Okay.
And it traditionally used to be ruled by Aquarius, but now Aquarius rules Uranus, and Capricorn rules Saturn. So that being over my sun just might mean it might be a little more irritable for the time that it's here. I might have trouble sleeping.
So is it kind of like the metaphysical meets the symbolic in a sense? Like the planets are actually moving, like time is actually changing and physical objects are changing, but these objects also represent something symbolically? Okay, so that's what this is all about. When you see the planetary movements and just outer space in general, these calculations, are they just movements of it? Like,
yeah, totally.
Okay, so it's essentially the physics And when you put the symbolism behind it, it gives it meaning.
Yes.
Okay. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to explain, especially to people who aren't interested or don't understand it already a little bit.
Right. Hopefully this video or episode explains it.
Yeah, and I can get a little more into depth with that too. With like the sun being your ego, the moon being your innermost self, your personality, your emotions. That can kind of show you how you handle like emotional situations as well.
And wait, just a quick thought. Seasonal depression and everything like that. Like most people get sad when it's the wintertime.
Sure.
Does that have any correlation with astrology? Because it's the physical being almost symbolic, impacting your emotions. It's weather and not planets.
Yeah, I mean that's more weather, but
isn't that symbolic in a sense?
Maybe. I haven't tried to dig too deep into that. I would say that maybe if you have seasonal depression and there's something that's specifically bugging you, you might be able to see that in your chart. Like you might be able to see where that's falling, like what house that's falling into, and so that you could possibly see, okay, well maybe I'd have better luck if I started to do a new workout routine if it falls in your 6th house, or a generalized, like, I don't know, maybe something that would help pull you out of the depression a little bit more. But, I mean, that could also kind of fall into the 12th house if you have depression or if you're more prone to it.
So, would it be like somebody's going through a problem or a situation and they just see the weather kind of as a coincidence in that regard? Like they just have something anyway? Or it is because of the planets moving?
I would say if you have actual depression, that would be something that you would be able to see. If it's just a seasonal thing, it honestly probably is just the lack of sunlight, because that can affect people pretty heavily.
But that's more about, like, vitamin...
Yeah, that's more vitamin D than anything else.
Yeah, okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I actually don't know. I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, we're not experts.
Not on that.
Yeah. I do want to ask, though.
Yeah.
Would you mind getting into kind of a simplified, for the viewer, obviously, how these calculations work, how you find these data?
What do you mean how the calculations work?
Like, how do you calculate this stuff?
Well, there are websites. I would say some of them are a little more reliable than others. Astro.com is a really good one. That's typically what I use. It just has so much more information. It gives you everything. It gives you the full chart.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what most professionals use as well. CoStar, like apps like that, they tend to be fun, but they're not always very accurate. Especially with mine, it told me my sun was in a different house than it actually is, and I'm not really sure why.
Yeah.
And you can use apps like, let's see, Cafe Astrology, I know, is a really big one that a lot of people use. And that'll give you your general planets if you're just wanting to know what planet is in what, which is pretty generalized, and most people who come to me for readings, that's kind of all they want to know. Most people don't dig a whole lot deeper than that, and that will tell you that, but if you are wanting more information, I would say Astro.com is really good at the calculations, and it gives you current transits and all of that as well. It just doesn't really explain it.
Okay.
But
so,
you can reach out to an astrologer to explain it.
Yeah.
At that point.
Is it astrologer or astrologist?
Astrologer. Or I guess both.
Yeah, I guess not the most important question of the day, but one nonetheless.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask, moving forward into the next segment, so when we do these calculations and we learn what our planets are and the zodiac and everything and the house, how can this information that we learn help us?
Yeah.
What can we do with that information?
So I think first of all, it might be best to just start with what each planet is and what those mean, and then going into what the houses are and what that means, and then I can explain. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows what the 12 signs are, but I could also go through those if needed. And then we can talk about what that means when they're all mixed together. So, like I said, the sun is the ego, the moon is the innermost self. Your Mercury is going to be how you communicate. Mercury rules all communication. And I know recently Mercury Retrograde has become a very, it's pretty memed.
I'm smiling, but I don't get it.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, Mercury's in Gatorade. Or whatever. I hear a lot of jokes about that now.
What does that mean?
I know that's become very mainstream joke that people tell.
What's the joke about it?
Well, the joke is that, first of all, Mercury rules communication, but it also rules over the internet and a lot of other really important things. So when, and technology especially, so when Mercury goes retrograde, which means when a planet seemingly looks like it's moving backwards in the sky, it retrogrades back into the sign that it was in previously for just a temporary period, and then it will go direct again. And when that happens, there is going to be a slowdown of whatever that planet is. And so with Mercury retrograde, which happens like 3 or 4 times a year, which is why it's becoming very mainstream knowledge, because it happens a lot, where it retrogrades back and then it comes back, because Mercury travels pretty closely with the sun. So your Mercury is usually going to be in the same sign as your sun, and if it's not, it's in the one above or below it. It's always going to be one of those 3. It's never going to stray from those. Mercury leading communication, when that's retrograde, they always say it's a bad time to sign contracts. Your phone might break, your car might break down. You might just have a lot of issues with physical technology and communication just being off. A lot of like miscommunications tend to happen around that time. Like
in just basic, like I heard you wrong, or
yeah, exactly. Like or just like if you feel like you're having issues with other people. And that's why people blame Mercury retrograde for stupid things.
But isn't that their own fault at the end of the day?
I mean, yeah, but it is the thing that's probably causing that problem. So it's a joke, but it's kind of also not a joke.
It's interesting because I've talked a lot on this show about the concept of the locus of control. How there's the internal and the external, and the internal is having control over your life, and essentially if there's an issue, it's my fault because I'll own up to it and react in that way. But external is I'm just going to blame it on something else. So basically what you're saying is it probably is your fault, which is internally, but outside of that internal locus of control is a greater external.
Sure.
So it actually is out of your control, but I hope that's not the case, but because it undermines the theory. But
I mean, if you think about it, though, there is a really good point that was made that the moon controls the waves when you go to a beach.
Yeah.
So if a full moon can do that, and we are, 80% water, 90% water? I don't know
it controls us.
I don't know the calculations for how much water that we are, but why wouldn't it? Like, why wouldn't the moon be able to control us? I mean, I always have a hard time sleeping when it's a full moon.
That's a good point.
And I always make jokes that, like, oh, it's full moon, that's why I didn't sleep last night. But
I'm growing hair in weird places, and I'm starting to howl.
Right. It just, like, last night, I couldn't sleep, and I was just wide awake, and there was absolutely no reason for it.
It's that dang Mercury Retrograde.
Mercury is not in retrograde. But yes, I realized this morning that it was a full moon, or it is tonight at least. And so
it was for the past few days too, right?
I mean it goes direct. It's like a full moon tonight.
Not just how I viewed it.
But it's going to look like a full moon for about 3 days, and typically the effects of the full moon can last up to 5.
Okay. Makes sense.
So, yeah, I tend to just sleep horribly for the 2 to 3 days before and the 2 to 3 days after a full moon. And I just feel like I'm wide awake. So it might have something to do with the tides or the waves or whatever.
So I guess real quickly, do you want to run through the other planets?
And what they do? Keep getting off track.
No, but we made some good points.
Yeah. So Venus is going to be the lover. That's like how you are in relationships, how you act towards people that you love, how you want to show your love. It can also be what you love. So, for example, mine is in Pisces. So I tend to like be very dreamy about the things that I care about.
Is that also the hopeless romantic?
Unfortunately, yes. But how I tend to channel it is through movement. So I do partner acrobatics, I dance, I do a lot of yoga, mindfulness, like movement-based activities, and I daydream about choreography, like 80% of the time. That's what's going through my head. It's just, what can I do that would be cool or different or just beautiful? Like, how can I make these movements come to life?
Yeah.
And so I think that's just how my Pisces Venus comes out, just as a very, like, free-flowing, movement-based, because Pisces tends to be very dreamy in general.
Okay, so it's like the love from Venus mixes with the dreamy nature of Pisces. So that's how this taxonomy works.
Exactly. And that falls in my 9th house, which is travel and higher learning. So I tend to travel a lot, to work gigs, to perform, to teach, to go to festivals, to, like, it's taken me all around the world for this thing that I love. So that actually ended up being very, very accurate for me. It also can be higher learning, so I am constantly trying to learn what more I can do to gain more strength, or like what more can I practice? What can I do for it? It's always a higher learning kind of thing, and it's conjunct my moon, which is in my 10th house. So it's also, it ends up being what I want to be known for, and how I project myself, because my moon being in my 10th house of, like, honors, of career, of who I am and who I want people to see me as, those two are conjunct for me, which just means that I have a pretty solid line here connecting the two.
So your identity as a whole, reputation, and just how you view yourself, and basically just everything, comes from all of these planets.
Yes.
And the zodiac that mixes with it, and then the house, which gives it another interesting tilt that changes it from the rest.
Exactly. So see that little line right there? That line connects these two placements and makes that just...
Oh, so it really did connect. Okay.
Yeah. So that's what the conjunction is, and that's how that has manifested in me personally. And when I started my classes for astrology, my teacher even made a comment about that. She was like, oh yeah, like you probably want to be widespread and known for these things that you love to do, which is true. I spend a lot of time working on photo shoots and like video work and stuff so that I can post them and people can see my art publicly, and that's the only thing I really want to post because I want people to see my art.
Why do you want them to see your art?
Just so I can share my ideas with others and have them be able to try it if they want, because I make up a lot of it. So it's cool to me when people post saying that they saw something that I posted and wanted to try it themselves or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, that's just... that's something that's always been really cool to me. And it's given me such a big, wider spread connection with people all over the world, which once again tied in my 9th house.
Yeah.
And how I've used technology to kind of pull that all together so I can meet people from all over the world and work with people from all over the world for this thing that I love. So that's how, like, all of those things together are working together into my personality, into what means something to me, and that's just how that's manifested for me. And of course that's going to be different for every person, and you know, everybody's chart is going to be different, and the way that
everybody
it comes out, the way it comes out is going to be different.
So Mars, right?
Yeah, so Mars is next. Mars is like sex, aggression. It can
Sigmund Freud.
Yeah, basically. He probably had a very crazy Mars placement. Maybe that was in his 10th house or something. I would be interested in looking that up. But yeah, so Mars is kind of just, if you get angry or upset, how do you handle it?
Okay, so it's just aggression.
Yeah.
And temperament?
Temperament, yeah.
Okay.
Any of that. Jupiter is luck, expansion.
So are you only in Jupiter?
What?
Because you're lucky.
Oh. I mean, yeah, Jupiter, it's kind of wherever Jupiter is transiting, whatever house you have that in might be where you're finding current luck. For me, I have Jupiter in the 4th house in Libra. So, like, I mean, we had a pretty good family upbringing. That usually the 4th house is family life. And
okay.
So I just had good luck with family.
Does everyone have luck?
I mean, yeah, everyone has Jupiter somewhere in their chart, of course.
Okay. Just in a different placement.
Yeah, and if you, like, let's say you have it in your 6th house, that might mean that you just have really good luck with your health and fitness.
Okay.
It can also be expansion, though. So if you have any tough placements and you break something, it might expand into something bigger. So
can you give an example?
Yeah, like, I guess let's say you break your foot or whatever, you hurt yourself. And maybe that was something that you could have seen in your 6th house. Maybe something was transiting through and you did something and it was big enough that it showed up in your chart. Maybe that could expand into being, like, because you broke your foot, you found this other thing because you couldn't do you couldn't play football anymore. You couldn't run on your foot, so maybe you found something else that you love to do because you had to.
So butterfly effect.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So Jupiter can kind of be that expansion that pulls into a more widespread situation.
Makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Cool. If it's in your 7th house, it might just mean that you have good luck with relationships. Maybe you met somebody early and you've settled down and everything's
So real
fine.
quick, so when you said that the 7th house is about relationships, is that universal for all of the planets? Something to do with relationships in the 7th house?
Yes, the 7th house is the other.
Okay.
I'll get to the houses in a minute.
Okay, I guess we got to do the planets.
I guess we got to finish the planets first.
Yeah.
All right. I'll go through these pretty quickly.
Okay.
Saturn is life lessons. So, I'm sure you've heard of a Saturn return. That's also been something for some reason that's become very mainstream lately.
But for the class, just
yeah. So I've noticed, at least lately, in a lot of TV shows, they joke about the Saturn return. This is something that happens when you are between 27 and 30. So mine actually pretty recently started, and we're actually going through the Saturn return of the internet right now, which I thought was very interesting because
that's the age of the internet?
The age of the internet, yeah. So the internet was born around the time I was. Huh. And that just basically shows that the internet was going to have a huge resurgence of importance with the pandemic. It really did. Because it went into Aquarius in, I think, April or May of last year, and then it retrograded back, and now it's back in Aquarius for the next 2 to 3 years. Yeah, so you can find in your chart what your biggest lessons in life are going to be, and usually a lot of people go through a lot of hardships when they get into those ages.
It's like the midlife crisis, or not settling down yet.
Exactly. You might be having a baby, you might be buying a house. Actually, they say most people die during their Saturn return as well.
Just because of the stress?
Just because of a lot of different things. I think, I forgot what the percentage was, but there's a very huge percentage of people who die during a Saturn return. But that happens when you're almost 30, almost 60, and almost 90. So, I mean, a lot of people die when they're almost 90.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a pretty common one anyway. But they say that the people who make it past their third one are the people that end up living till, I mean, they're 112, you know? Like the people who are just really well off and really strong, and those are the
probably
people that make it.
The sixth house, right, with the good health?
Well, sixth house can also be bad health, depending on what planet is there.
Oh, man.
It's just health.
I thought I was finally getting it.
Sixth house is just health.
Okay.
So physical health. If you have Jupiter there, then yeah, you probably have really good health.
Is it kind of like the tarot, where the reverse and the upright? When it comes to the houses?
No.
Okay.
No. I would say, though, if you have Saturn in your sixth house, maybe you have a life lesson that you have to learn because of your health. So maybe you get cancer because you were supposed to learn a lesson from it.
No.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Maybe with, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, like, you can just kind of see if you're going to have some kind of underlying health issue, typically, in there. Especially if you get diagnosed with something, there's probably something transiting through your sixth house at that time, whether or not you have any natal planets there.
Okay, so Uranus.
Uranus is kind of just all things odd. Like sudden events. I've heard it compared to the Tower in tarot, going back to that. So if you know anything about tarot, the Tower is like the big upheaval, the sudden change, that thing that just like that you couldn't really control. Uranus can be that. Yeah, that's kind of just what it tends to be. And Neptune, it usually is pretty close to Neptune, and Neptune tends to be dreams. So
like ambitions, or when I sleep at night?
More of when you sleep at night.
Okay, so actual dreams.
Or it's like, it can be like delusional dreams too, though. So like, maybe...
Like fantasies?
Yes.
Okay.
So maybe if you have Neptune in your first house, you might be delusional about how you look. Maybe you have like body dysmorphia, or maybe even the opposite end of the spectrum, you think you are just the hottest thing to walk the planet. You know what I mean?
Man.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like, that might be somebody with like a god complex. Or
it like
something like that.
Is it a fantasy as well of like fantasizing people other people too?
If it's in your 7th house, yeah.
So, like...
I have that placement.
So, like, a creepy fantasy about, I don't know, like, insert any lovey-dovey fantasy.
I tend to think that people are generally good, I think, because of that placement. I think that's how it manifested in me. So often when people show their true colors, I get confused because I thought they were the person that they were in my head and not the person that they actually are.
You create like a faulty perception of them when in reality they're ever changing and probably not what you once thought they were.
Sure.
So it leaves you with a lot of cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
'Cause it's like, wait a minute,
you
don't play golf.
Yes, exactly.
Probably something more important than that. But.
Usually, yeah. Yeah, and then Pluto is the generational planet. So if you are confused if you're a millennial or a Gen Z,
or Gen X.
That's where you can look. Yeah, or whatever generation that you're in.
Greatest generation.
If you're unsure, that's where you can look. So I'm a millennial. Mine's in Scorpio.
So what does that mean?
You're Gen Z. Yours is in Sagittarius, I believe. Just so my generation, millennials, are going to tend to have more Scorpio-like reactions towards things.
But what does that mean?
It just kind of depends on
the house, too.
On the house,
okay.
And what the sign is. When it comes to, like, you personally.
Okay.
Your generation is in Sagittarius, so that is anything, like, 9th house themed. It's going to be higher learning. You guys are going to want to travel a lot. Maybe breaking social norms. Being very outgoing and outspoken. Sagittarius tends to not necessarily have much of a filter. And so I've kind of noticed that with your generation. A lot of you are very, like, well-spoken.
Well-spoken or outspoken?
Outspoken. Or both. Both.
I would say mostly outspoken.
Yeah, you guys aren't afraid to speak your minds. Especially when it's against something.
Yeah. We all love negativity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay, so then a quick overview. There's 12 houses. Each house is technically ruled by a sign. So if you look at it, Aries is the first, the baby of the zodiac. Aries is, the beginning of spring. It's the first one in the zodiac new year. So, everything is going to start with Aries, and Aries tends to be very me centered. So, yeah, first house is going to be you, your personality, who you are on the outside, who you want to be seen as. That's just kind of who you are. The second house is going to be money. So that might be how you get your money, what you tend to do for a living, any of those kind of themes.
Or even, like, does that apply to incentive and work ethic too? Like, I want to work harder to get a better job. Like, I might want to go into IT for money specifically rather than following my art passion because I'm less likely to get money.
Yes, exactly. So depending on what you
offense.
Depending on what you have in the second house, maybe if you have like some of the planets, or even if you have like maybe an earth sign that falls in your second house, you might be more likely. Well, it rules Taurus, so let's talk about that, I guess. So Taurus tends to be a very, I guess we can actually do these together, like the signs and the houses. That's probably a better way of doing it.
What does that mean?
So Taurus is the second sign. It rules the second house.
Okay.
So Taurus likes the finer things in life. They like to have money. They like comfort. They like food. They like food a lot.
I like food.
But like good food. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, Taurus is, they kind of just like things a little more conventional, and they like their material possessions, their earth signs. They like earthly things, which does include money. So, yeah.
Just materialism?
Materialistic, yeah.
Okay.
Tends to be. So, yeah, the second house is going to be more about, like, money and work and what you do. And who you are based off of that.
Mm-hmm.
The third house is ruled by Gemini. So Gemini is very quick thinking. It tends to have a rep for having two personalities. And
because it's two things, right?
Yeah, so Gemini rules the shoulders and the arms. So that's kind of the first time that your body splits into two.
Okay.
And so Gemini, at the worst, can be a very gossipy sign. They tend to be two-faced or talk more about each other. But they're also very, very smart, and they value higher thinking very much. So, the third house is going to be anything relating to the mind and thinking, communication. Siblings fall into this, and social activities that you might like, interests, early education, and neighbors. It can also be like short weekend trips, like things that you like to do that aren't going to make a huge impact on your life, but are fun, you know?
Yeah.
The fourth house is ruled by Cancer, and that rules the home, roots, family, self-care, emotions, mothers. So Cancer tends to be very motherly. It's a very like, oh, let me take care of you kind of sign.
And like sympathetic.
Yeah.
Empathetic, I should say.
Exactly. And they also just want to have like a nice home-cooked meal all the time. They like being home. They tend to be homebodies.
Okay.
So, of course, if you're going to be a homebody, you're going to want your home to be pretty. You want your home to look nice. You,
the feng shui.
Yeah, you want your family to get along. You want everything at home to be a good energy for you. So yeah, the fourth house is going to deal with anything related to that, related to the home. So if you have something transiting through your fourth house, it might just be a good time or a bad time, depending on what it is, to do home improvements. You know, like if Mercury is retrograding through your fourth house, maybe don't start a new project.
I hate when that happens.
Don't buy a new car. Don't buy a house. Don't sign contracts.
All right.
But if Jupiter's going through there, then yeah, whatever you're gonna end up doing, you're gonna end up loving. So
you're gonna get the lucky one.
Exactly. The fifth house is romance, love, affairs, play, creativity.
Which one's that?
Childlike spirit. It's Leo. It's ruled by Leo.
Which one? 7?
Oh, the fifth house.
Oh, fifth.
And so Leos like to be seen. Leos like their attention. So the fifth house rules all of those kind of things. Just romance. They love, they just love being and doing anything creative. They just love to play.
Expression.
You know? Expression, exactly. So any of that is going to fall into the fifth house.
Interesting.
So it might be that you have a really easy time expressing that and finding that, or it could be that you don't. You have a really hard time with it. Yeah. Maybe tapping into that is hard. Sixth house is going to be health, fitness. It actually rules pets. So if you have a pet, that could fall into your sixth house. I'm not quite sure why it falls into the sixth house. And
yeah, I'm a little confused by that.
Yeah, it's
I wasn't
a little
expecting
weird.
That.
Pets can also fall into the fourth house, they say. So I see it more as a 4th house thing, but yeah, a lot of people tend to say that it actually falls into the 6th house because it's kind of like systems. Habits and organization tends to fall into the 6th house too. So it's not always your like physical health, but it can be, and it also is like kind of how you live your day to day.
So it's like well-being.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Which is different than health, in a sense.
In a sense. They're pretty related, but...
Yes.
Yeah. Because if your well-being isn't good, your physical health isn't going to be good either.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're all kind of connected in the 6th house here.
Yep.
7th house is going to be your other. It's the one that's directly across from the 1st house. So now we're getting into the mirrors. So every sign has a mirror sign that's right across from them. Me being an Aquarius, my mirror is going to be Leo. You know, you're being a Cancer, your mirror is going to be Capricorn. So everybody has...
So would I conflict with Capricorns?
Yeah, so you and your mirror are always going to have a lot of pretty strong similarities. You're going to share a lot in common, but you're also going to clash on a lot of things as well. So there's a lot of give and take with mirror signs.
Interesting.
Yes. You might have a really good time with them, and you might also really hate them. A lot of people clash with their mirror sign.
Yeah.
Or you could be really compatible. It kind of just, it depends on, I guess, the rest of the chart at that point.
Yep.
Yeah, so the 7th house is your other. That's where the other person comes in. Relationships, marriage, contracts. It could also be business partners, though.
Colleagues.
Yeah, just people that you need in your life. Like, for me, I think that shows up a lot with me needing a partner for what I do.
So, like, dependence or interdependence?
Yes.
Okay.
Because you can't do partner acrobatics without a partner. So, you know, so
you could
sometimes...
levitate.
Yeah, right, just float myself. So, I think there's a lot of... It's not always just your romantic partner, but... Yes, other people can fall into the 7th house as well.
Yep.
8th house is going to be Scorpio. It's anything related to Scorpio themes. Oh, the 7th house is Libra, if I forgot to say that.
Okay, I think you did.
Okay, cool. The 8th house is Scorpio. So that's going to be sex, intimacy, merging, shared finances, inheritance. It's across from the 2nd house. So whereas the 2nd house is going to be your own money, this is other people's money. So you could come into an inheritance. Somebody might give you money for something.
Oh, okay.
It could also be like, they say the 7th house is when you get married, or like when you find the other person. So the 8th house is like that marriage, that signing of the contract, the like binding of the deal. And
is
then
8 like giving and the taking?
It kind of, it's more like, okay, now we share money.
Okay.
Like now we like have this shared thing. It can be like contracts for like, oh, we signed a marriage license or
right. It's
whatever.
Like we gain. Don't they get like a tax break or something?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's like that's what you gain, but it's also like there's some things you have to give too.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like sacrifice for reward.
Yes.
Okay.
So the 9th house is going to be Sagittarius. It's across from Gemini, the 3rd house. And this rules travel, wisdom, philosophy, higher education, cross-cultural relations, anything
And real
big.
quick, when you say higher education or higher learning, what do you mean by that?
That's going to be like going back to grad school, maybe even college, or if you do a certificate program after school, that could be higher learning. Just anything that's one step beyond what you already know.
Like a specializing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like anything specialized. So whereas Gemini is almost that like immature, your mind, that thought, the communication, this is like putting it into action. Whereas the 3rd house can be like small trips. This is going to be the big trips. This is going to be when you went to Europe for a month to backpack. This is going to be like, you know, these are the bigger things
that
you end up doing. And, you know, Sagittarius is fire, so it's going to be very passionate about those things.
Okay.
10th house, let's see.
And this is the one I fell in a lot, right?
Yeah, your entire chart is in Cancer, and all of your Cancer is in the 10th house. It's actually very funny.
That is weird.
I've never seen a chart like yours before.
Well, according to Myers-Briggs, I'm the rarest personality type, so...
Well, your entire chart is in Cancer, so...
So let's get into it. Explain
right.
the 10th house.
Yeah, so the 10th house is ruled by Capricorn. So it's going to be very work-faced. Capricorns like to work hard. They like to focus on pretty much just work all the time. They tend to be straight to the point. They can be seen as very emotionless often.
Interesting. Because I'm not. Not very emotionless.
Well, that's Capricorn. That's not. You're Cancer. So you actually, on the opposite side of Capricorn, tend to have all the emotions. Whereas Capricorn doesn't have any of it. That's kind of where that mirror comes in.
But the 10th house is Capricorn, right?
So the 10th house just rules career, long-term goals, structure, public image. Men fall into this house. And,
Makes sense.
Yeah, so... basically, yeah, your career, like who you want to be seen as publicly.
So like mine is like that, but because it's Cancer, it's like with an emotional twist to it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So for you, I think your Sun, your Moon, your Mercury, your Venus, maybe not your Venus. I think your Venus was the only thing not in Cancer.
We'll pull it up after this.
Yeah, so your whole chart basically did fall into the 10th house. So you want to be seen for this. You want your emotional well-being and who you are on the inside to be structured with your public image.
Okay.
You might want to be seen for something that you talk about, for something that you say, because your communication is there. Mm-hmm. Your Sun is there, so that's who you are. Your everything is there for you. So this is going to be where you are. Career is going to be very important to you, and long-term views and everything. So if you have a vision for something and it doesn't happen, that's probably going to be a thing that like really upsets you.
Okay. So let's do the next two and then we can look at it.
Yeah, sure.
And then we could kind of end it off after that.
Yeah, cool. So, the 11th house is going to be where Aquarius falls. Aquarius is a very weird sign. Very alien-like, very strange, and likes everything unconditional,
Like you just love things for the sake of loving it?
Either that or, like, the opposite. Like, you
hate things
you either
for the
love
sake of
it or
hating it?
It's not hate. It's, like, an indifference. You either, like,
Apathy?
care or you just don't care.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Anything unconventional, think Aquarius as well. Like, just anything. If you see anything weird, and Aquarius probably had something to do with it. Somebody with strong Aquarius placements, at least.
Like when I saw a paper towel dispenser shoved in the urinal. Was that an Aquarius?
Probably. Either that or a fire sign who got angry at it.
Maybe.
Yeah, so the 11th house is going to rule groups and friends and social awareness. The Aquarian tends to be quite the humanitarian. So Aquarius, like, that's going to be the person who's out there with a, fighting for a cause.
Okay.
Any kind of cause. The person who's rioting probably has some kind of strong Aquarius placements, too.
Just any sort of
they
thing
care
like that.
about causes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so as a whole, when a planet falls into Aquarius, like when we just had almost all of our planets in Aquarius a couple months ago, that was basically about the greater collective, coming back together after all of the pandemic came in and, what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of like the calm after the storm.
Okay.
Like rebuilding after all of the chaos that the pandemic brought with it.
Or like opening up everything, society again.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Like now we had all of this time to focus on going inward and fixing everything from the pandemic. Now it's time to come together and fix all of the bigger problems. Yeah, so the 11th house is going to be your groups, your friends. It can also be your like hopes and wishes and dreams for the future, looking ahead, but mostly it's it's kind of just where your friendships fall and how that ends up looking for you. If you are a person that frequently gets bullied, I guess maybe that would be shown here. I don't have any planets in my 11th house, but I do have, it's ruled by Taurus for me. You're always going to have a sign in every house whether or not you have planets there. And so I like my friendships to not have any drama. I like them to have kind of Taurus energy of like, I know my friends are reliable. I know they're there when I call them. I know that they're going to be there to listen to me if I need that. But I don't necessarily, like, if they get dramatic, like, that's it. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't deal with any of that because of that placement. And then finishing it off, we're at the 12th house. That's going to be Pisces. Endings, healing, closure. Pisces is a very dreamy sign. They love all things. You know, they're kind of just very open. They're very dreamlike. And so with the 12th house, you're going to have a lot of like spirituality, karma, afterlife. But it's also like what's hidden from you. You might find something out when something's transiting through the 12th house, that somebody lied to you maybe. Your subconscious all falls into this. It is going to be across from the 6th house too, so whereas that can be your physical health, this can also be your mental health. So if you have some kind of, like I was saying earlier, depression, schizophrenia even, like any of those like mental health issues can all fall into the 12th house if you have planets there. And yeah, that's all 12.
Nice. So what do you think is the big takeaway with all of these concepts and planets and houses? How can it help us become better?
I think it's kind of another one of those things that you can take with a grain of salt if you want to, or you can get as deep into it as you want to. I know that once I started really studying this, it helped me to better understand the world and myself and the patterns that go on. It helped me understand the pandemic and why all that was happening. It helped me understand, like, why I do certain things that I do, or even, like, personal compatibility. I can see, like, why I go to my friends for certain things and why I wouldn't go to other people for certain things, or why somebody's communicating weird, or whatever it falls into. You can find a lot of that.
How reliable is it, do you think?
Oh, very. I mean, I look up everybody's chart. Like, everyone that I know, I have all my friends' charts basically memorized. And I use it, too, because I'll be like, oh, if I come at this person with this way of communicating, they're not going to take it well because of whatever placements they have. So
you become the puppet master.
Yeah, like, I mean, it kind of is just like, oh, well, I'm not going to do that to them because they're not going to take it well. So I'm going to find a new way to communicate with them that's better for them.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess because we're over an hour here, we can start to conclude. So where can we find you, and do you want to give yourself a plug?
Sure. Yeah, if you are looking to have a reading done, I do typed up personality assessments, if you want one of those, or I can sit down either over Zoom or in person and do a full-on chart reading for any reason. If you want to do a personality one, whatever your theme is, if you want to do like kind of a horoscope one, if you want to look at the current transit, or if you just have any compatibility questions or anything, that can be done as well. You can reach out to me. Are you gonna do
I'll plug
link
information in the description.
Yeah, I'll have Casey link my Instagram and email, and you can contact me through that. Yeah.
And as for here at Culmination, I do a lot of self-improvement, psychology, philosophy-based videos, podcasts, the works. And if you're interested in this, feel free to check out the other videos. So yeah, thanks for listening. We're not experts, but we try our best. So with that said, I'll see you guys next time.